About an hour outside of Halifax, nestled in Lower Ship Harbour, you'll find the Deanery. Now, for generations, this place has been a community gathering place. These days, it has a mission of environment and arts and community building. It's also home to a number of hiking opportunities that can take you through the woods and down to the waterfront. And it's here that I'm on my walkabout today. The Deanery covers over 25 acres of waterfront property. For over 75 years, this land was home to a summer church camp called the Tangier Deanery Centre. In 2011, the property was purchased through the work of local residents, artists, and environmental educators to ensure that the land didn't end up as a private development. They repurposed the area as a place for community building, the arts, and environmental sustainability. This place offers workshops, internships, educational programs, and facility rentals. The trails and land are an important part of the work they do and how they support other organizations. As you travel around the site, you can stop in here to pick up an audio device to get an audio tour of the various sites you'll visit as you walk around here, or you can download it and listen to it on your phone. Now, the great thing about that is you can choose to visit every space here or just the ones you're most interested in. The main hall here speaks directly to the environmental mission of this place. The building is the original building on this site from its time as a church camp. It was renovated over time to be more environmentally friendly and includes features like solar power, wood-fired radiant heat, and even a warm air system based on reused pop cans painted black. In keeping with the idea that arts and the environment go hand in hand, this space is currently home to an art exhibition by Nat Chantel called Recalling Morning. Now, as I travel around the Deanery, I'm going to check out a few of the exhibition pieces. Recalling Morning is a collection of 12 hollowed-out forms based on fallen branches and roots. Much like everything at the Deanery, this is about interaction. The artist says she created this space as a place for healing. The artist says, quote, "This nature-based installation is a reflective response to ongoing devastation from generations of people being discarded, displaced, uprooted, and silenced." This was one of 10 Dalhousie School of Architecture projects here on this site. And of course, they continue to do work with the Deanery. This is a bread oven, and it really does symbolize some of the environmental efforts that take place here. This is made of heavy clay, and instead of being fired by gas or electricity or coal, the way this works is you actually build a fire inside, heat up the bricks, and this creates a thermal mass. Once it's warm enough, you put your bread in and you bake it, or really anything else you want to bake. You may recall I mentioned that part of the mission here at the Deanery is instilling the importance of art. This space is called The Tiny and is an artist in residence space. It was built using natural building techniques. This space is called the Shieling. Now, it serves as an outdoor classroom and is another one of those projects that was supported by the Dalhousie School of Architecture. This building has a green roof, and of course the green roof has all the things you would expect, like grasses and mosses, clover, but they've also had some success planting potatoes on the roof. One of the things that this site promotes is traditional woodland management techniques. For example, one now relatively uncommon practice is to cut the stump, and new shoots are then allowed to grow from the existing root system. Wood is then harvested from the new shoots, which grow. From an ecological perspective, this is a far less invasive and damaging method of harvesting than the other extreme, which is whole tree harvesting, where the entire tree, including the roots, is removed. I've made my way across the Deanery site to a place called the Nursery. Now, this brush fence was actually built by artists and residents here to show how you might use fallen branches and other debris from trails This kind of material would often simply be burned, or at the very least mulched. This option uses the least energy and thus has the least environmental impact. But more than that, this installation has a practical purpose. The spiral shape of the path keeps deer from the site, protecting saplings, thus the name the nursery. It's also a windbreak to protect some of those same saplings. Of course, anyone with any amount of brush on their property knows that brush fences can also be a home for nesting birds or a place of respite as they escape from predators. There are a wide variety of species planted here, all common to the Acadian forest. Trees like hemlock, pine, spruce, oak, sugar maple, black cherry, and more. One of the most special parts of the Deanery is that it sits along Ship Harbour. It provides water access to 3 important protected wilderness areas. If you watch Walkabout regularly, you'll have heard me talk about the 100 wild islands. And this is yet another part of the coastline that provides access. From here on the dock, you can also look across to the edge of the very large Tangier Grand Wilderness Area, or paddle inland towards the Ship Harbour Long Lake Wilderness Area. This is Ship Harbour. Now, such an amazing site, surrounded by beautiful forest. Now, Ship Harbour did not get its name from the fact that it was a great place for ships, or that this was a safe harbor of some kind. No, in fact, it got its name from a rock at the mouth of this harbor, which is that way. That rock is shaped like a ship, and it's called Ship Rock. Also that way is Label Island and a little inlet called the Tittle, neither of them very far from where I am right now. Now you could grab a kayak and explore these waters, or on a day like this, you could take in the calm and serene nature of the day and just enjoy yourself sitting here. I've taken some time to explore the informal walking areas of the Deanery site so far, but after the break, I'm going to head out onto a more formal trail here.
Feel the sunshine.
I'm at the Deanery in Lower Ship Harbour, Nova Scotia, about an hour outside of Halifax. It's a place that celebrates the environment, arts, and community. It's such a peaceful place. Now, I've spent some time exploring the built environment here, following some of the walking paths, including a trail all the way down to Ship Harbour. Now, I'm going to be headed out onto a nature trail shortly for a more formal hiking experience here. However, you can also cycle from here. This space is the Roost, and it serves as a classroom as well as a number of other roles. One of those roles is a bike hub, where they maintain and repurpose old bicycles. The Roost is in fact one of the original buildings from the days this site saw as a church camp. It also features a living roof, just like the classroom I visited earlier. If you're interested in cycling, there's a 35.5 kilometer loop which will take you from the Deanery through places like Clam Harbour, Owl's Head, Lake Charlotte, and even Memory Lane. At roughly the midway point, you can even stop at Clam Harbour Provincial Park, home of the ever-popular Clam Harbour Sandcastle contest. Of course, there are shorter routes leaving the Deanery site as well, ranging from 2 kilometers all the way up to that full 35.5 kilometer loop. Next to the Roost, you'll find a solar kiln which uses the sun rather than fossil fuels to dry wood. This is a slower process for drying, but it reduces cracking and results in wood, which is especially popular with craftspeople and luthiers. Nestled in the woods along the nature trail, another of the installations by Nat Chantel. The artist invites visitors to breathe and listen to the land here. The installation encourages people to sit in nature sounds, but also listen to the silence. This area is not only home to this art installation, but also the rare ghost pipe. Ghost pipe is also known as the spirit plant or bird's nest. Now, unlike most other plants, this rare plant gets its energy from fungi or by connecting to the roots of trees. It's just beyond blooming season here, so these look a little bit different, but if you were here between June and September, it's a unique flower to see. Of course, the earliest people on this land were indigenous communities, hunting, fishing, and living on the land. The Mi'kmaq name for the broader area of Ship Harbour is Kedimini-Bukwick. While many details are lost to history, the Mi'kmaq name translates to where Indian men were bludgeoned to death, suggesting a dark and sad history near here long ago. These days, the Deanery is a place which embraces Indigenous heritage and the treaties which Indigenous communities reached with newcomers to these shores. The Deanery has an active, strong, and genuine relationship with Indigenous communities. The art installation I've been stopping at on my journey today promotes the idea of finding a healing place in nature, and that does seem appropriate generally, but also given the name the Mi'kmaq have given this place. The 25 acres that makes up the Deanery site includes parcels on both sides of West Ship Harbour Road. As I cross the road, I'm entering an Acadian forest stand, and it's a wonderful place to contemplate nature as I continue my hike. Ship Harbour was formally settled by Loyalists in 1783 from the Royal Nova Scotia Volunteer Regiment. Now, this area, as well as much of the Eastern Shore, has long relied on nature for employment, whether that be through forestry or the oceans. But as roads improved, communities didn't have to be quite so self-sufficient. It was a lot easier to get into the city. Manufacturing efficiencies meant that the factories that used to dot the small communities all the way up and down this coast gradually disappeared, going to larger centers. One such industry in this area was John Lewis Industries. John Lewis Industries operated a peg factory to the north of here on Weeks Lake. Pegs are the name for shoe shanks, a part of the shoe in the sole under the instep. These days they're most often made of metal or plastic, but at one time they were made of wood. The company had 3 factories here between 1922 and 1945. All 3 of them burned down until the owner eventually gave up trying to rebuild. It would have been an important industry in this community. It employed both men and women and paid them both $1 a day. Many took up weekly lodging in the area, and work hours were reasonable for the time, from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. with an hour off at lunch. Lumber was sourced from this area all the way out to Mooseland, and the product was sent out by ship from Ship Harbour itself, so there were lots of spin-off jobs in different industries. In addition to the fires, the company also saw the wood in this area become infested with insects. So eventually they packed up and moved to Quebec. The company still exists. They don't produce shoe shanks anymore. They now produce 5.5 billion tongue depressors and ice cream sticks every year. Of course, it wasn't just John Lewis Industries that was interested in the timber in this area. There were lots of small businesses that were. And it was the Acadian forest, this forest, that was so attractive to small mills and manufacturers. Acadian forest is rapidly disappearing in Nova Scotia and elsewhere. More than 60 species of native tree are found in the Acadian forest, including yellow birch, red spruce, sugar maple, and more. This trail is actually a series of 3 lobes rather than a single out and back path. The trail serves many purposes at the Deanery, in addition to being a pleasant place to walk. As a mixed Acadian forest, it's an excellent outdoor educational space for visitors, ranging from school groups to researchers wanting to understand more about the forest and how it grows. In that respect, it is in many ways a different sort of outdoor classroom. This space is also an opportunity to show how a sustainable woodlot could operate, as all the management techniques on this land are, as one would expect, sustainable. If it were not for the foresight of community members in saving this land and protecting this remnant of Acadian forest, generations of children and adults would not have the opportunity to learn about the importance of protecting the natural environment.
Oh, come on, won't you be mine?
The Deanery is a special place. It invites visitors to learn about the environment through art and education. The trails here offer a sense of peace as you think about your surroundings. After the break, I'll be heading back along the shore to Grand Desert Beach, somewhere that has its own interesting story.
Feel the sunshine.
There are no shortages of different places to go for a hike. And on a warm summer's evening, maybe you've spent the whole day at the office or you've been out on a strenuous hike for the day, there's almost no better place to go than a beach. And that's where I found myself, here at Grand Desert Beach, which is full of history and a lovely place to go for a hike. It's where I'm on my walkabout this evening. Grand Desert is an Acadian community in the Halifax Regional Municipality between West Chesuncook and Seaforth. It's a small community with a population of only about 300 people. In the original French, the pronunciation is almost the same as the English, Le Grand Désert. But here it was a phrase that to locals meant the land of no trees. Of course, long before the French gave this place a name, the Mi'kmaq lived here. They were here for thousands of years before the Acadians arrived sometime in the mid-1700s. While records suggest that there were some Acadians in this area prior to the Great Expulsion of 1755, most were among those who were allowed to remain in Nova Scotia. Many of the Acadians who settled in this area after the expulsion were originally Cape Breton Acadians. These days, many of the people who live along this inlet and in Grand Desert commute to Dartmouth and Halifax, but there's still a strong connection to the ocean and the land in this area. There are commercial clam operations right along this inlet, and there are some small agricultural operations in the area as well. After World War II, this beach became famous for something else. The southern end of this beach was used as an air-to-surface bombing range by the Canadian forces. From about 1951 to 1983, planes would fly overhead, bombing and strafing this beach in search of targets. You can imagine living here right along the road in Grand Desert, hearing sirens, air raid sirens to tell you that practice was about to start, and looking out your window to see planes flying by and small explosions on the beach. It would have been like something out of a movie. The beach was officially called the Chesuncook Air Weapons Range. This was an ideal location for the Air Force. This location is only 20 kilometers as the crow flies from Shearwater, where military aircraft were dispatched. From the immediate post-war era in 1946, the military used towed water targets for bombing. But it was only a few years later that they realized a need for land-based targets. This allowed for better observation of accuracy, dive angles of airplanes, and the results of the strikes. And Grand Desert Beach was chosen. On January 17, 1951, the first bombs fell in this area from Sea Furies, Fireflies, and Avengers, all flown from Shearwater. There was once a point off the south end of the beach called Cape Antrim. It has since eroded away both from natural forces and from the power of bombs dropped from the air. Very little remains out there to even mark the grassy headland that once existed. In the beginning, pilots used mostly unused World War II ordnance here. Over the years, it would change and be all kinds of different sorts of bombs and rockets used along this range. Now, the pilots would fly seaward, so they'd fly along this beach and then out over the southern end, dropping their bombs. And the reason they did that was if they missed or the bombs ricocheted, they wanted them to ricochet out into the ocean, and of course not on land where people lived or were working on the range. There was an area southward of the beach which was codenamed Foxtrot, and it was a no-go zone for obvious reasons. Local residents were notified that the bombing runs were going to begin by a red light on the top of a control tower. The practice targets themselves were made up of brightly colored rings of beach stone or old tanks. So what happens when a bombing range is no longer used? Well, in cases like this, it gets turned back over to the community, but not quite so fast. When this place closed, the southern end of this beach was littered with debris and unexploded ordnance. And while they didn't use high explosives here, they did use live ordnance. In 1995, close to 10 tons of ordnance was removed from this site. Now, almost 30 years later, the military continues to survey the beach and the waters. It's the potential for unexploded munitions and other debris that means that the southern end of this beach is still closed. Now, the community here waits patiently for this beach to be open in full one day. And of course, it's because of this risk that as a hiking location or even as a beach, this location is much less well known. Though these fences and that sign, they don't really stop everybody. Lots of people still hike through there, despite it being so dangerous. Hiking opportunities can be found in all sorts of different places. Here at Grand Desert Beach, what was once a military bombing range is now a popular place for hikers and beachgoers. And one day, you'll be able to hike right to the southern end of this spot. This place has a lot of history, and that day will be another chapter in the history here. One that started with the Mi'kmaq, went on to the Acadians, then had military history, and now as a recreational area. You know, Ridge Ridgway, the famous explorer and mountaineer, once said that the best journeys in life are ones that answer questions you never thought to ask. Well, I hope you find some of those answers and questions on your next walkabout.
Hey, come on, feel the sunshine. Oh, come on, won't you be mine? Hey, come on, feel the sunshine. Oh, come on, won't you be mine? Oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, feel the sunshine. Oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, feel the sunshine. Hey, come on, feel the sunshine.